Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Elevate to Great podcast, powered by Factory 11, the nation's leader in sports marketing, and the podcast where you can elevate yourself to greatness. I am super excited about today's guest, a three-time WBC Lightweight Women's Boxing Champ and a member of the 2016 International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame. Ann-Marie Saccurato, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
I have no doubts that our listeners, our viewers are going to have a tremendous time listening to your background, your past, and your story. And as we dive in on it a little bit, take us back to when you were a kid, before boxing was ever on your mind. I understand that you were a volleyball and a basketball player. How did these sports and experiences in these sports really help you and propel you to what you would become in the boxing ring?
You know what? It actually even started, to be honest, way before that, when I was in nursery school and I was running around with the boys, climbing on treehouses with the boys, and teacher told my parents, she's got to get involved in something. And I was always active. I was always looking to do something. Got involved first actually with ballet and gymnastics, believe it or not. But actually gymnastics held a really solid foundation, I believe, for getting to understand my body, and having the desire to actually push myself to higher levels. Even at a young age, the individuals that I was surrounded by in that academy, they started instilling something in me. My mother then instilled something even greater in me when she, said, "Hey, listen, why don't you try out for the basketball team at school?" And she always, had that. She started that spark inside of me that she knew, and I guess all parents say this, but I took it to a deep level. There was something more inside of me, that I was always meant to be a leader. And I held on to that. And, she got me involved I actually got involved with the basketball team, softball team. I didn't get involved to volleyball until I was in high school. And those three sports, being part of that team and becoming captain of that team, all the teams that I've been on, it gave me that understanding of what was inside of me that I could develop others around me to become more on the field, to become more on the court, to push them to what I saw inside of myself and be able to lift my other teammates up to achieving that and achieving greatness. And it was about that camaraderie, just building that energy and vibing off of each other. And that's also where I started to feel that leadership within myself and took risks on the court, took risks on the field. Situations where I'd hear my coach on the sidelines about to yell at me, but then I'd make the shot and we'd be ahead at halftime or we'd win the game, or, I'd make a risky play, but it worked out because I had the courage inside of myself, the belief inside of myself to make those things happen. And to see the effect it had on my teammates was something that kept pushing me for more.
That courage and those things that you were able to develop that gave you the belief in yourself, the ability to make those big shots, to want those big moments and to succeed when you got those big moments. When you think back to all of those different sports you played, where did that come from? Was it coaches that were helping instill that in you? Obviously, you spoke about mom being a big driving force behind that. Do you remember any coaches having a powerful impact on you, lessons you learned along the way?
You know what? It stems from actually something outside of sports that instilled that. I remember sitting on my basement stairs and, my parents, my father was very abusive to my mom. To be honest, they got divorced very early on. My father was not the best human walking the planet. To go a little deeper into that briefly, didn't pay child support, didn't pay alimony, left us with nothing. I went through having electricity shut off, car repossessed, I seen it all. On top of my father being abusive to my mother. And I can remember sitting on the stairs in my basement, in grade school, very young, and having this thought that just went through me amidst all of this that, I was watching going on around me. that, again, that I was meant for more, that I was meant to give what I had inside of myself to others, and that sports was going to be my platform to do that and to build and develop the dream that I had within myself and to push me to other levels in my life of greatness. Becoming a professional athlete was going to do that. And that was really, I can't say where it came from. It came from the man above, the Holy Spirit, that put that inside of me. And, I held on to that. I realized that everything that was going on around me was there to fortify myself, almost as tests to build what I had inside of me to become strong enough to possess the journey that I was on, the assignment that I believe, and to this day is still placed on my life and allowed me to reach those pinnacles of strength. So it wasn't necessarily a coach. It was actually life going outside of me and just, being open, even as a child, to what I was feeling inside of myself and trusting in that plan, that this higher purpose that was put inside of me. And that's really what propelled me through every level of sports, through every level of school, and to where I am right now.
And that's amazing, the way that you frame that, because there are many times that people look back on some of the things that you went through as a roadblock. And one thing that we like to talk about on this podcast is the fact that, things do not have to be setbacks. Things do not have to be roadblocks. If given the right thought process about them, they can be setups. They can be the things that prepare you for the greatness that you have the ability to achieve. And that's amazing that even at a young age, you had the ability to think that way.
Yeah, it went through me. Again, I can't say where it came from. I believe it came from the man upstairs, and just it's having that courage, having that fortitude. And that's, really what defines, the good from the great, good from the elite, creating those champions, the ones that have the courage and the fortitude to be able to hold on to that thought and that belief in themselves, and knowing that nobody else needs to believe in them. Nobody else needs to see that vision. That's why the vision was given to themselves, because it's meant for you. Right. And it's having that impenetrable mindset, the fortitude, and being just unapologetically, relentlessly driven savage on what it is that you believe, and holding on to that against all odds. It comes down to what is that end game? What does that end goal mean to you? And what does it mean to those that are around you, that support you? And, allowing that, having that courage, you're faced with obstacles, you're faced with adversity. That's what's going to happen in life. That's the game of life. Now, what are you willing to do, to give up in order to overcome that? And that's where your destiny lies. That's where the greatness that's within you really starts to shine. So I say pressure's a privilege, right? So diamonds are made from that pressure. Well, you have the pressure inside yourself to push against the pressure that's pressing upon you. That comes from the light that's within yourself that you're holding on to, that allows to shine, to become that diamond in the end. How much do you believe in that? How much do you believe in yourself, and how much do you want the end game to be? What it is that you vision.
That is outstanding stuff. If you just listen to that, listeners, that is outstanding stuff. That is how you take yourself and you take all of that ability within yourself and you turn it into something great. Let's fast forward a little bit to getting it towards the end of high school. You had a plan to go play volleyball in college. Was that the ultimate plan at the beginning? Yeah,
I mean, my dream was to play volleyball and to play basketball, play at a Division I school. It's what I was pushing towards. I actually ended up getting recruited by Seton Hall University for their volleyball team. And funny side note, I always had this vision that I was going to be at the school and a college coach was going to see me and pull me onto the team. And again, having these visions and whether manifestation or whatever, word you want to put in there, I was at the school to look at the school and was on the basketball court at Seton Hall University playing around, and didn't know this, but the head coach of the men's team was in there. And he saw me and he comes over to me. He's like, "You're Phyllis's recruit." Phyllis was the women's coach at the time. And I said, "No." He's like, "Well, you need to be." And he brought me into the office to meet with Phyllis, said I need to be on the team and that I needed to talk to her. Well, long story short, I ended up being recruited for volleyball. They were going to have me come on and work with the team that year for basketball, and then follow through with that. What ended up happening though was after my senior year in high school, I'm going to actually go back a little bit now. My whole senior year in high school, I had a feeling that something life-threatening was going to happen to me, but I was going to overcome it. Okay. And that feeling actually got stronger inside of me as that year went on. Well, that summer of 95, I was competing on a volleyball team at Empire State Games, upstate New York. It was 3 days after my 18th birthday. And coming home, and originally I was supposed to be in another individual's car, change of plans. I ended up in a teammate's car, fell asleep in the back seat of the car, and we ended up getting into a fatal car accident where I almost lost. I was supposed to not make it through the night on my end. The car that I was in, driven by my team captain and another teammate, was in the front seat. Again, I was in the back seat sleeping. We hydroplaned. We did a 360 across Route 17 up in Monticello, New York, upstate. And we ended up wrapping a pole on the opposite side of the highway, on the northbound side of the highway. We were going southbound. On impact, I got shot through the back window of the car. They found me halfway out the car, hanging unconscious. I can remember, when you have a dream and you feel your body spinning or moving, I can remember that. And actually, crazy enough, I remember being hanging out the car. I remember there being darkness. I remember feeling rain. And I can tell you, and I still to this day don't know if that was the reality or if it's my imagination, but I'm going to go with that this was real. I can remember, like they talk about seeing a light. I can remember just dark, and then this globe of light being there. And then I don't remember anything else but being on a board on the floor, asking the medics if I was going to live or not. So fast forward from that, they took me on advanced life support. They were supposed to fly me to a Trauma One center in Westchester, New York, which is actually where I lived. The weather was too severe. They put me on advanced life support. They drove me to a local hospital, then drove me down on advanced life support to the Trauma One center. I went through somewhere between 16 and 18 hours of surgery. They had my family in a private room. I wasn't supposed to medically make it through the night through the surgery. I did. And when I woke up, the first words that I said coming out of surgery and out of all of that was, "What about sports?" First thing that I said when I woke up. The doctors said they didn't know if I was going to walk normal again and that I was never going to compete again. And I told them that they had no idea what was inside of me. The extent of the injuries was I had no feeling in my left leg due to nerve damage. I broke my left fibula and tibia, had a metal rod put in. I broke my right femur. I had my leg in traction for about 6 to 8 weeks, broke my right hip bone. I broke all the ribs on my right side, punctured my right lung, shattered my right arm, had a plate put in there, tore apart my chin, was in ICU, CCU. This was in the hospital from August 5th of 95 to a week before Halloween. Week before Halloween to a week before Thanksgiving, I was in rehabilitation. And then the day that I got released from rehab, my mother picked me up, drove me home. I went up to my room, I changed, and the first thing I did was go out for a run with my mother yelling at me. But it was like, I had to. I had to take, we get one chance at this. And I've always lived like that. Every breath we get, we have, every breath we take, we don't get back. And again, going back to, what defines people that become champions with greatness is they're willing to go that one extra rep all the time and putting in it. So I knew I needed to get back on the game, and there was no better time than right then and there.
I know probably the answer to this question, but as I was preparing it last night, I threw it in there. But I would be shocked if you don't answer it the way I expect. But was there ever a thought, obviously laying in the hospital, spending all that time in the hospital, was there ever a thought of why me?
No, I knew it. Like I said, and I can't explain why I've had the thoughts that I've had prior to. I said I had the feeling beforehand. When it happened and I was in the hospital bed, I knew it happened to me for a reason, and I knew it was, again, part of that story. And what I said, I put it out to the universe when I was a kid. I'm meant for more. I want to inspire lives. Well, if you want to be that source of inspiration and that source of greatness, right? Greatness isn't just what you do, it's what you're inspiring others to do and become. I needed to go through those paths and to go through those tests and show that, yeah, I'm that person. I'm her. And I needed to become, again, that pressure being applied so I can truly see what I'm capable of and be able to show others what they're capable of. I always, every second in there, listen, I had resistance bands attached to my bed. They were telling me as simple as, don't sit up too long, because I was on my back for about 6 weeks. They didn't want me getting dizzy. I was fighting all the time. I'm the one that stood up on both feet in front of the doctor before they told me I could be weight bearing. He just looked at me. It was constantly pushing against all odds, pushing the envelope to my limitations. I know what I'm capable of. So that happening was just like, all right, what's next? Let's go. And I took it in stride. I had my friends coming in, setting up PlayStations. We're playing video games, food delivery. Like, I was having a good time there because I knew I was coming back stronger. It was just more fuel to the fire, and part of my story that I knew needed to be there for me to have the outcome on other people's lives that I hope to have, and part of my legacy that I'm meant to do.
So tell us a little bit. You spend time in rehab, you come home from rehab, you go out for that run. What does that next 3 to 6 months look like after that?
I was in the gym every day. Everything in life, cliche, right? But cliches are there for a reason. I've come to realize that because they're true. Everything in your life happens for a reason. And my senior year of high school, they just started a program where if your grades were good enough, you can go out and get an internship your third, fourth quarter of your senior year rather than going to classes. So I was able to do that. And I was working in a gym with physical therapy, sports rehab in it. And I just became an absolute sponge. I was there whenever I could be there outside of my intern hours. If I wasn't at practice or in a high school game, I was at the gym just trying to learn from everybody there, and started training myself and understanding the body and understanding the mechanics and how things work. So when the accident happened, doctors say that if I hadn't been doing all that, the injuries that I sustained could have been much different. And when I got out of there, it was, like I said, running that day. And then the next day after that was right back in the gym. And I spent every day in the gym working on different things that I needed to work on to build my strength, to get my movement back, to get my cardio base back up, to be where I wanted to be. At the same time now, that's when boxing actually wasn't boxing first. It was Jeet Kune Do, which is a martial art that Bruce Lee had created that came into my life. And actually some boxing classes. So there's a trainer that worked there that taught Jeet Kune Do. He studied it throughout his lifetime. Get involved in that. Then a good friend of mine sends me something about the New York Golden Gloves. And I was like, okay, I can't do A, B, and C. And now this is a couple of months in. I can't do A, B, and C, but, I can strike. I can move. I'm like, all right, I want to compete. So I ended up going into Golden Gloves. And when I get into Golden Gloves, I end up getting buys all the way to two buys that I got that put me in the finals of the finals. Yeah, I think it was no. It was 2 buys, got me to it was finals, and end up getting a fight at Gleason's gym. It had to be before the finals against. That was fight before the finals. I fought this girl who was a national champion. And I had no boxing really experience. I was hitting a bag. I went in there fighting, again, going from what's in my heart. And with 30 seconds left, she breaks my nose. The fight ends. They say, listen, we have an extra ticket to the Nationals, which is that Sunday. And I have a broken nose, black eye. That doesn't happen in the amateurs. It's about safety. So if you're injured, they're not putting you anywhere. But they put me on a plane to Midland, Texas to go fight in the U.S. Nationals. And I ended up actually fighting the same girl in the finals of the U.S. Nationals. I fought the whole U.S. Nationals. I fought with a bloody nose, bleeding all over the ring. I get to the finals of the U.S. Nationals, and I fight the same national champion again. I lose, and then put everything else goes on hold. I'm like, I'm boxing. And it became just a part of me. It's something I fell in love with because of how it pushes you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually in that ring. It's your truth. And, somebody said to me once, watching me fight was like, my life is a living art. And I was like, wow, and it put things in a different perspective for me. So I come back the next year and end up winning the New York gloves, winning the national gloves, turning pro. And I kind of just set the course to the next step of my life, getting away from basketball, from volleyball, from all the other sports into this is where I'm supposed to be now. So that accident, I think, happened to build other levels of my strength, guided me to where I'm supposed to be in this ring, fighting one-on-one with this other individual and seeing who I really am of myself, and being able to then, I realized, start to inspire others outside of the ring that knew my story, that knew my journey, not even just in the States, but in other countries. I remember there were times that I was, you deal with a lot of stuff in combat sports, and some of the ugly that exists in it, I would see, and I'm like, this is not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to push myself to new levels, and I'm doing this because I want to inspire others. Like I said, that's been my going mission, right? And anytime that I thought about even stepping back from the sport is the day I would get an email, I would get a fan letter, or somebody would say something to me about how I inspired them. And it was just signs showing me that this is greater than yourself, and kept me pushing towards what I've done.
That's an amazing story. It's funny how they God used the accident to ultimately kind of detour you, steer you in a different direction.
Yeah.
My story is very similar to yours, in that all I had ever been and all I'd ever known professionally is being a college baseball coach for 20 years of my life. Our head coach retires in 2021, and I have a chance to go do showcases all around the country for high school kids and spend more time with my daughter. And through doing that, I started to realize, as a college coach, I could reach maybe 40 kids a year on my roster and on my team and have an impact on those guys. But now I get to travel the country. I get to speak with thousands of kids every single year. And you're right. It's those messages that you get. Hey, coach, you changed my entire baseball career. Hey, coach, something you taught me at a camp 3 years ago changed my platform and changed my path and where I ultimately ended up. Those are the things that ultimately keep us going and keep us driving to do those things that we're doing. And, sometimes you need a little bit of that reinforcement, especially when you're like, hey, is this really where I'm meant to be? And for me, I look at a weekend like this past weekend, my daughter's softball team playing their first tournament of the spring. And I sit there and I look back and I see all the fun and excitement and enjoyment they're having. And, I know that me giving them the ability to do this and enjoy this, I'm right where I need to be. Getting an opportunity to jump on a call with someone like you, with the background that you have, and allow our listeners to hear this story and let it impact them and change them for the better. I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, and that's the same thing you felt as you began that boxing path and that boxing track.
Sure.
Let's fast forward a little bit. Start out that boxing career professionally, 9-0-2 before your first loss in 2005. And I'm going to try this name, to Belinda Lara Cuente. Hope I got that one right. Tell us how that set you up for a year later when you would ultimately win your first WBC title, how that loss propelled you to that ultimate victory that next year.
It's funny because, I know Belinda to this day. She actually lives down here in Florida. And we trained together. Me, Belinda, Melissa Hernandez. I mean, there's a bunch of us down at Gleason's gym. We're all training together. But in that training, there's that competitiveness, and that rivalry is very real. A bunch of alpha females in the same gym wanting the same thing. And Belinda, she was one of the big names at the time, and I was just coming up. Well, I'm coming up to prove myself. And all that I wanted was the top dogs. I didn't want any build-up fights. I was going against the grain on absolutely everything. And to note that I say that because I was going against the grain, but I had nobody really reeling me back. I didn't have, so what a lot of people don't know is that I didn't really have a team, a solid team with me or a solid coach. Majority of my boxing career was me, myself, and I with the heavy bag, training myself, pushing myself through those, through the movements, through the learning and the training and the technical aspects, which, it was different. It was a different thing for me because because I was working so much and I needed to be working to support myself. And again, I was pushing on building two dreams at the time, as a coach and as a fighter. Well, regardless, so the mindset that I have, the mindset Belinda has, wanting to, be top dog, I had a fight at the Westchester County Center in New York. And while I was in the back after the fight, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know she was in the audience. And I guess she had gotten into the ring and called me out. Somebody came running into the back to tell me, and it's like, absolutely. And she definitely had more experience on me that fight. I made mistakes that, looking back on that fight, and I didn't have the business being in the ring with somebody that many fights at that time with the little experience that I had. So I understood the mistakes that I made. And again, that just propelled me to be like, all right, listen, you got to work on A, B, C, D. Let's make it happen. So every day was working on, this day's devoted to this day's devoted to this, and building what I needed to build and building the reactionary skills that I needed to build, building the angles and the movement, the footwork, working on those little things that I didn't have to, to compete with her on the level that she was at. And, that's what it is though. Again, it's putting the time into your weaknesses day in and day out until you can attain the level that you need to be at to compete with the best. And that's really simple as it is.
Fast forward a little bit further. November of 2008, you lost to Emiko Raikai, but answered back 9 months later to defeat her and win your third WBC title. What changed from fight one? What changed? What was different?
Honestly, she wasn't promoting the fight. Honestly, that fight, and I'll never say, listen, like I said, Belinda, I took my loss. I had a title fight in France, and I just was off of my game, and I had the ability to take the fight that I had in France, but I took the loss. I wasn't there. I wasn't performing the way that I knew I needed to. Just things weren't syncing up. But that fight in Japan was hands down mine. There's not even a controversy, over knowing that. I got the emails. I, had the people commentating that as well. And what I found out after the fight was that Emiko was promoting the fight, and she was involved in the whole promotion of the fight. So, and I believe, if I'm correct, that had to do with raising money for the orphanage that she grew up in. And, I'm not one to ever say that. Again, I'll take my losses. I own them, and I appreciate them because, again, right, it's not losses, it's lessons. I value that. But that fight, that fueled me up knowing that was a situation. I was like, no. I want the rematch. We got the rematch. And she was, not behind the promotional team, and put the definitive exclamation mark on, that's my belt. This is my position. And, I own this. It's my ring.
Outstanding. So. And you also got the opportunity to step in the ring a few times with Holly Holm. Did you ever see, through those experiences with her, did you ever see her going on to what she would ultimately do in one of the biggest upsets in sports history against Ronda Rousey?
Sure, absolutely. I love Holly. I have a lot of respect for Holly. And me and her, the first fight we had, we were toe to toe that whole fight. I got emails even when I came home from that fight saying, it should have been a draw. It should have been a draw. Whether it should have or not, I wanted the rematch. I enjoyed it. It was, the most intense fight that I had been in. I know she felt the same way. She had, interviews where she had stated, I was the most, or the toughest opponent that she's ever faced. And I think we both, in some way looked forward to a rematch. When the rematch happened, truth be told, I I was injured. I actually took that fight, and the day it was the day before, 2 days before that fight was offered to me. I broke my right elbow and I tore my right tricep. I had a freak accident. I was sitting on my Harley. I just bought it, and the bike started to tip. I put my hand down to catch it, just reaction. Felt the crack pop, and broke my elbow, tore my tricep. Like I said, my team was like, "No, you're going to be fine. You're good." I had that stupid warrior mentality at the time. I was like, "I got this, no problem. I want this fight." They're saying, but again, I didn't have the right people in my corner that would have looked out for my best interests at the time. Because I really should have waited. But again, and again, I look at it like, it's part of who I am too. And if that fight didn't happen, that fight happened, and it pushed me to opening my eyes to other things in life and where I need to be. Because I had a terrible outcome in that fight. Did not go well at all. I basically fought Holly with one arm. But then, I actually ran into Holly last 2 years ago in Vegas at UFC fight. I had one of my fighters competing, and actually happened. I know we're going off topic, but this is a good story. I'm in the elevator, and the guy gets in the elevator with me at the hotel, and he's like, "Hey, you fought Holly Holm?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to know how I know that?" I was like, "You saw the fight?" He's like, "No." He's like, "Actually, I'm staying with her." It's like, she was talking about it last night. She said, "You're one of the toughest opponents she's ever faced." And I was like, "No shit." And he's like, "Yeah, you want to go say hi?" I was like, "Absolutely." So I go up, we surprise her, and me and her were like two high school kids, like just hugging it out, tears in both of our eyes, just like, but it was the most beautiful thing, like the amount of respect and love. And I think that's something that needs to be, brought out, that, the top competitors, that's really what exists behind the closed doors. It really is. It's love, it's admiration, it's respect. It's the respect that I have for what she's doing. Yeah. Coming in against Ronda, I love Ronda. I have respect for her as well. But I think being a boxer coming into a MMA world, if, Ronda doesn't have a stand-up fight game, Ronda wants to go in, she wants to throw. That, Holly's movement, you're not going to take an MMA fighter or judo, or that has a ground game, put him against a stand-up fighter and think that ground game fighter or that thrower is going to take the fight. Holly's head movement was too good, so her coming out with that win, I pretty much thought that's the way it was going to go down. So, I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her and for everything she's done in the sport and for the sport and continues to do for the sport.
Yeah, that was one of the heights, obviously, of MMA at the
absolutely.
time. And
Absolutely.
I remember watching that fight at my cousin's house. I used to watch them all back then. Big fan of Ronda Rousey. But I just had a feeling that night. I was like, I just don't think these styles line up correctly.
Yeah.
I think Holly's going to win this. I think she was a
Holly's
big underdog in the beginning, and it closed at 20-1. So she made me a little money that night by taking her in that one. But fast forward to, life after boxing for you. Obviously,
Sure.
we mentioned at the Open, Hall of Fame inductee, but now you're in the business of training fighters. What kind of things do you see, habits, characteristics in the most elite fighters? What are some of the commonalities across the board in how they go about their business, traits that they have? What do you see in some of the most elite ones?
Mindset. Against that impenetrable mindset of doing what needs to be done day in and day out without question asked. Ask them asking me what else can they do, what should they be doing, what should they not be doing. It's having that open communication, them being able to take my advice or me coming down on them about something, or being, listen, this can't be this way. If I see them falling off, to pull them back into that championship mindset. It's that being able to shut down whatever is going on outside of the gym to be able to handle business in that session. But it's also being, and this is where you earn the trust as a coach, and really what the bottom line, I believe, being a coach is about, Besides, the programming and, you know, the inspiring them to do more and all of that, great. But building the trust for them to come to you with other issues that they have going on in their life, or pressures that you're feeling, or anything that is going on outside of the gym that's affecting their mental, because that's just one thing that I think it's definitely getting more attention now, but that mental aspect of any athlete, especially a fighter, is so crucial. So as a coach, having an athlete that can come to me, we can discuss what else is going on, and like ask for my advice and openness, and being able to read where they're at in that session and where I can push them to, or where I need to kind of draw the line back on that day, is really vital. So having that communication, having the trust, but again, that athlete having that mindset and that ability to flip the switch when they need to.
I think you hit on three big components of success and greatness in anyone. Number one, the ability to be focused on your task at hand. I think that is a tremendous first step. Number two, the ability to communicate with your coaches and those around you. And then number three, the ability to take criticism, to take coaching, and to utilize that to your advantage. And I think that's where a lot of athletes, no matter the sport in this day and age, that's where they many times fall short. Athletes hear a lot of what they want to hear from their coaches, from the people around them, because they want to be their buddy. They don't want to make them mad and have them go, in a fight game to a different camp, or in a different world of sports, a different team. But they don't hear near enough of what they need to hear. There are more people that need to tell athletes what they need to hear, so that they ultimately can become better. And the longer, I tell guys all the time and athletes all the time, the longer you go without hearing what you need to hear, the less time you have to do something about it. I would rather you tell me exactly what I'm doing wrong and what I need to do better, so that I have more time to work on that, than you not tell me and waste a year of my life, and then ultimately I'm not any better than I was a year ago. So that is tremendous. Tell me a little bit about what you see in fighters that don't end up making it. What are some things that hold them back, other than mindset? What are some things that trip them up and keep them from reaching the abilities they have?
I think it's always going to come down to mindset. Even though you say not about mindset, but it's going to control everything, right? But I'm going to say that the two things that come to mind right now anyway is not staying in camp, taking off, after a fight. Take some time off, reevaluate things, restore yourself, rejuvenate, all of that good stuff, but get back in the gym, and get back to work and start building the foundation. Let's start working on the things that we want to work on to gain advantages, whether it be compensation or improper movement patterning, and building a foundation to become stronger, so that we can, when it comes to, fight camp, where you're 8 weeks out from a fight, even though in the game, and that's the other thing, you don't always get that opportunity in the fight game. You might get called on short notice, and you got to be able to ramp up real quick. So it's always being ready when you're called upon. I think a lot of fighters, take too much time off after the camp, or don't take their off camp serious enough. They might be in the gym doing the technical work, but they're not getting in, strength conditioning, any of the performance aspects that really can be critical, because those performance aspects, or building, whether your speed, your precision, your ability to react, your ability to continue applying pressure from round 1 to round 10, or, if MMA fight round 1 to round 5, that can cost you the fight, right? Talk about inches and seconds. Those inches and seconds that win or lose that fight come from the buildup and the foundation. So I think, with my guys, they stay in camp, they'll take a week, 2 weeks off after the fight, and then they're right back in, because they understand that value. And then I think the other aspect is when, a fighter, and maybe it is because they're not willing to communicate, they get too locked into their head, and they too much pressure on themselves, and they're just eating themselves up inside, because they're not letting out to their coach or somebody they rely on what's going on inside of them. And then that just has a negative effect on their outcome and their performance.
And I think you You hit a unique aspect of MMA and the fight game that, other sports don't necessarily see that much. And that is, you never know when that call is going to come. And if you haven't been taking care of your business, even when it might not be close to your fight or in camp preparing for a fight, if you're not taking care of business, you're not going to be prepared for when that opportunity comes and that time comes calling. And that could be a life-changing opportunity for you
Absolutely.
that you don't want to pass up on and that you have to take, but you want to make sure that you're staying prepared when that call does come. That is obviously very, very important in that game. Tell us a little bit about Rise and exactly what that is, what that means, and what you're doing with that.
So Rise, the actual name came to me, man, years, maybe 15 years ago or so, where I was actually sitting in a continuing education seminar and was taking notes, and then this word started. I think they started talking about business. This word Rise started coming to me, so I wrote it down. I wrote down RYSE, and I'm like, what does this stand for? I'm like, why am I seeing this? I'm like, why am I seeing it spelt this way? And then I started playing with it, and it's evolved, right? It's been years, so it's evolved, but it started out as, all right, Rise, RYSE, realize your strength every day, and that your strength is your physical, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, and building upon that. Because again, everything is built from the mental. And when you're in the gym, I want people to actually understand this. That's where you're building your mental, in the gym, as well as, listening to podcasts, reading books, all that other stuff is great. I do that on a regular basis. But in the gym is where you're building that mental strength, because that's where you're defining your willpower. You're facing adversity. You're dealing with resistance, right? You want to push against that resistance. You're dealing with failure. In the gym, you want to take yourself to failure, right? You want to take yourself to failure, see how far you can go, and then what do you have to do to get above it? Well, that's the same thing in competition. That's the same thing in life, and people don't see it the same way. All right, so that was where it stemmed, or it started. And then growing on to that was standards are very big to me. The standard I hold myself to and accountable for every day, and the standards I hold my athletes to every day, and continue to bring that higher, to level that up. So then raise your standards every day. And then a passion that I live with, the fire that's in my heart and my soul to do what I'm doing, and continue to do that and impact lives, and came to reignite your soul every day. So if you prime, I don't like, even in training, to use the word warm up. We're not warming up. We're prepping and priming our bodies for that session and what we're going to do, getting everything active. Well, prep and prime your mind for the day and what you want to achieve that day. So you think about your strength internally as well as physically, mentally. You think about the standards that you hold yourself to and want to raise upon yourself and others around you. And you think about your soul and the passion that you live with. Those three things are going to set you up for the day. So that's really where Rise comes from. Rise performance, right? Performance can be mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. So basically that's my brand, and the umbrella of that brand is working with not just athletes, but also work with general population as well. I do work with Gen Pop, and I've had incredible life-changing transformation stories that I've been blessed to be a part of on that. And that's just as, changing any life, being able to bring any life to their greatness is the most fulfilling thing that I feel, or that I can do. And being in somebody's head even when they're not with you, and you get text messages from these individuals of what they're doing today and how they're still thinking about things that you said, or even the one thing that I said to them, is impactful. So, working with athletes, and I work with all athletes. I do specialize in working with tactical athletes and combative athletes, right? Athletes in the UFC, BKFC, professional boxing, tactical athletes, work with Leos, SWAT, fire rescue. So being a strength coach, performance specialist, doing speaking engagements, and just getting out there to be a source of inspiration, empowerment, and impact.
That's awesome stuff. And one thing that I want to touch on that you mentioned there is the concept of the weight room. And in the weight room, we push ourselves to failure, and then we go again. And why don't we do that more in life? Everybody's afraid of failure in life. Everybody's afraid of failing and being labeled a failure. But ultimately, life is the biggest game. And we have to push ourselves to failure to understand what our limits are. And then we've got to reassess and push those limits even further. And I think that that's something that people miss out on because they're afraid to fail. They stay in that comfort zone. They do things that are easy. But if you're going to train, whether it be for a sport
Yeah.
or whether it be in life, you have to train yourself in an environment where you're going to fail. That's the only way
Absolutely.
that you improve and
Absolutely.
get better.
Go after it all. You have to own it all. You have to go all in, everything that you got for what it is that you want to attain this life. Look, we only have right now, right? Again, cliche, right? We only have right now. And, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Unfortunately, that's life, right? We don't know when that last day is. And we want to be sitting there and saying, oh man, what if I tried? Because what if you do fail? Great. Go at it and go again and go again and go until you get it or until you learn or until something says, okay, wait, I'm seeing something here. I want to pivot and it takes you a different way. Either way, you're winning, right? But if you're not going after and you're not taking those failures, you're the only one that's losing because it's a game. We have right now, and if you don't take those chances, those risks, how are you ever going to know what you're capable of? That's right there is where greatness lies. Going after it, again, being unapologetic, being relentless, unyielding fortitude and just put everything into what it is that you want. Be that man in the arena.
Failing
Right?
forward.
Be that man in the arena.
Failing
Fail
forward
forward.
is a thing. Failing forward is
big
a
thing.
thing. That is something
I
that
failed
people need
so
to
many
embrace
times.
more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it also, you know what? It shows you how, when you fail, how you feel from that failure, showing you how important something is to you, what the value of that is to you. If it really affected you, go after it again. What's holding you back? Because fear is gonna, right? Someone said fear is the greatest or the most invisible disease that there is, with the worst outcome. It can steal you of your dreams, of your health, of your finances, of it. Fear can take everything away from you. What's on the other side of fear if you push past it?
Greatness.
Right.
Greatness. We're going to dive into a new segment here on the Elevate the Great podcast. You have seen us do Elevate Eliminate. This week, we're going to do start to finish. So I'm going to start a sentence, Ann-Marie, and I want you to finish that sentence. I've got 3 of these for you.
Okay. All right.
The first, to be elite, an athlete must.
Be relentless.
Relentless. Great word.
Be relentless in the pursuit of your dream.
Great. To find one's greatness, a person must.
Look within themselves.
Outstanding. And then the last one, everyone has a plan until.
Right? Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. But you know what? That's the truth, because how are you going to deal with that? Right? You get punched in the face, you face failure, any adversity that you can put in there. How are you dealing with it? How do you go about overcoming it, achieving it, going through it? Right? And that's what you have to look at.
I was hoping you would take it there. I really was, being we do boxing, grind being the Hall of Fame. But I was also hoping that you would put an awesome spin on it like you just did. It's not about getting punched in the face. As Rocky said in one of the greatest speeches in movie history, it's not about how hard you hit, or it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And that is the key to greatness in anything we do. I got 2 questions for you to wrap up this episode. Number 1, if someone listening to this were post-accident with doctors giving them a grim outlook, just like you were on the future, what would you say to that person?
Believe in yourself and what's inside of you. Nobody else can define that. You define that if you give into those limitations, because what you tell your brain is very real as to what the outcome is. I never once listened to it. I never believed it. Not an ounce did I believe any of that, and kept pushing against it because I knew what was inside of me. And, it doesn't matter what anybody else says about you. It matters what you say about yourself. And that's all. That's what's going to guide you. What you keep conditioning, right? We condition our bodies, conditioning your mind to think until you believe, until you know. And once you know something, nobody's going to take that away from you. Nobody's going to stop you from that.
That is outstanding. I tell kids all across the country, ultimately, if you want to achieve anything in life, you ultimately have to start with true belief in yourself. You can't wait for someone else to believe in you. You have to believe in yourself. And it is a byproduct of 3 ingredients, in my opinion. It is positive self-talk. You got to speak to yourself positively. It doesn't matter what the world's saying to you, or what doctors are saying to you, or what teammates are saying to you. It matters what you're saying to yourself. Are you saying negative things to yourself? Because that negative is going to come to reality in your life. Are you saying positive things to yourself? Are you visualizing yourself being great? Are you visualizing yourself winning that match or winning that at bat or winning that game when the game's on the line? And then finally, in my opinion, the separator from the guys who make it and the girls who make it and the ones who don't, and that is ultimately hard work. You got to be willing to put in the work, and you got to be consistent with it, and you have to know that when you step into the ring or you step on the field that you've put in more work than the person across from you. That's what, in my opinion, gives you ultimate confidence to know that you deserve success more than that other person does. Second question. A young girl out there wants to pursue a career in boxing or MMA. What advice would you give to her?
Get started now. Get started now. Don't listen to, any naysayers, anything negative that anybody has to say to you. You have the belief in yourself and the fire in your heart. Go look to your local boxing gym, PAL, jiu-jitsu gym, any avenue that go to all of them. Try them all out. Which one really pulls at you, and stick with it. And then, anybody wants to reach out to me, DM me, go to IG, go to am.saccurato, Saccurato, and, DM me for any advice, anything that I can help you out with. I'm here. That's why I'm here. But get after it today.
It's almost like you've got my outline. Everything today has flown exactly the way I wanted to. And I didn't even have to ask you some of the questions. You just dove right in, and it just flowed so well. As we wrap up here today, anything else that you want to say or that you want to plug? Obviously, this has been a tremendous hour. These people listening are getting audio gold, learning about your story, learning about what it takes to push past adversity from a young age to almost a life-ending accident and to achieve amazing things. But anything else you want to plug, anything else you want to say to our audience before we end today?
Listen, you guys can also, I did plug my personal IG, and then my business is Rise, RYSE_performance_, and that's on IG. You also can reach out to me there. But yeah, anybody who's interested in working with me directly, online, virtually, or having me come out to do any speaking engagements, you can reach out to me there as well. Just a blessing to be a part of your podcast today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been a tremendous experience sitting down and talking with you. On the other side of this break, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. On the other side of this break, you'll get our Elevate to Great final take for today. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Elevate to Great Final Take. And my goodness, what a bunch to digest from Ann-Marie Saccurato, a 3-time WBC boxing champion and a women's boxing Hall of Famer. Just tremendous content. I hope you didn't miss a second of it, because if you did, there's a great chance that you missed something awesome. But my final take from what she said, and something she said very early in the episode, was to truly have greatness and truly define greatness. It is not just what you do, but what you inspire others to do. That is ultimately where true greatness lies. Not just what we accomplish ourselves, but what we inspire others to accomplish. If you have the ability to do that, if you have the platform to do that, that is where true greatness lies. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Elevate to Great podcast, powered by Factory 11, the nation's leader in sports marketing. Until next time, keep reaching for your greatness.